Welcome to week 4 of Introduction to Dreamweaver in the fall semester 2012 at Santa Rosa Junior College. Today we are going to be focusing entirely on CSS, cascading styling, cascading style sheets, and making sure that we create our pages with an HTML structure and style them with cascading style sheets. Before we dive into those specific topics, a couple of things I want to make sure that we're on the same page about. So I'm going to go back to the September 5th tab here and make sure that everybody's aware of what's due as of midnight tonight. You're going to be taking your HW2 page that you created in week 2. So remember, and this is something that I've seen one or two students that were a bit confused about, and that's because there are a lot of instructions in week 2, and you had to make sure to follow them completely. Not only did you create a new document, as we see up here, but later on you saved as HTML, HW2.html, HW3.html, and HW6.html. So all of those were saved as soon as you finished this assignment, and thus this screenshot that I show of my files for the homework should be identical to the screenshot that to the file structure that you see in your site. Okay, locally that is. So that being said, let's get back to those assignments. That being said, you were supposed to open up that hw2.html page that you had completed the week before and make some modifications to the page properties. And the idea was that you're comfortable with modifying page properties, which are all controlled in the case of this homework assignment by Cascading Style Sheets. Okay, so were there any questions about that homework assignment that is due as of midnight tonight? Okay, thank you, Melody, for telling me no. You had no questions. Sidnea, thank you. So that being the case, I'm going to also now open up Dreamweaver, and I'm going to first start by redefining my workspace. So here's the workspace that you see by default if you're inside of Dreamweaver and you've got your classic workspace set up. If I had designer workspace set up, it would look a little bit different. It would look something like this. In either case, for this class, there are really only a couple of panels on the right-hand side that you need to have open. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a little marker in here, and I'm going to talk about resetting workspace. Okay? So we can see that if you change things around, regardless of how you do it, you can simply select your workspace and reset that workspace. Now, I have been showing you that I've been working in the classic workspace. But there's some things about the classic workspace that I would change as well. And what I'm going to do is show you how you just use the panels that you need for this class, because screen real estate is always an issue. So for example, we're not using Adobe Browser Lab. I click on this little drop down over here and I say close this tab group. We're also not going to be using databases, bindings, or server behaviors maybe till the very end of the class. So I'm going to close this tab group as well. Now that doesn't free up a lot of workspace, but it frees up enough workspace for me to get to see my files panel better and my style panel better. And those are the two panels that I really need to have open. The other thing is my insert bar is up here. common layout, forms, data spray, all this stuff is up here. And I like it on the top like that. Some people like to have it over here on the right-hand side, but I like it on the top. It gives me a little bit more room. And I also like having these color icons. You can control whether these icons are color or not by clicking in the gray space to the right of the icons and choosing color icons, because by default for some people they might be turned off. But now that I have got that workspace set up the way I want it, I'm going to now manage this workspace by no, not manage, sorry. I'm now going to create a new workspace that's going to be based on this current layout and call it Jeff's Classic, because this is a variation of the classic workspace without the business catalyst and the data and server behavior tab group. So I've got a little bit more room going forward. So that's one thing that I wanted to make sure is to just show you how you can create a workspace that's specific for your own needs. Any questions about that? Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to review just a little something that's also come up in working with students individually about site definitions. For this class, you really have two site definitions. You have one for the digital classroom lessons that come from our Dreamweaver CS6 digital classroom textbook. And you have another site definition for our homework. These are the two site definitions that you're going back and forth between in order to do all of the work that you need to do for this class. When you're working with files from the text, you're working inside of this digital classroom lessons site definition. When you're working with the assignments page and uploading your homework, you're working with your Intro to Dreamweaver definitions. So again, I'm going to put a little marker here, and I'm going to say reviewing site definitions. So reviewing the site definitions, as we go forward, we want to make sure that we're working from one site definition for the book. That's our digital classroom lessons. And the way to set up that site definition is discussed within the text of the book. And working with our homework assignments from the assignments page, which is our Intro to Dreamweaver site definition, which we have covered in great detail over the last few lectures and with the instructions on the assignment page. Speaking about the digital classroom lessons, every week, let's say this week we're looking at lesson 4. What I have to do every week is redefine which subfolder this digital classroom lesson site definition goes to. So I have digital classroom lessons selected. I choose Manage Sites. I click on the Edit Currently Selected Site. And I don't have any remote server information for the book files because I'm just testing everything locally. I'm not uploading anything. That's a significant difference between the site definition we have for the homework and the site definition that we have for the lessons in the book. So for the lessons in the book, I just have a local site folder, and when I'm ready for a different lesson, I browse to the directory structure of the files. And by the way, this is another important thing. You don't have to work off the CD. You simply have to drag all of the giant lesson folder onto your desktop or into your My Documents or wherever it is that you like to keep your files, and then you have all of the lessons right on your desktop or wherever you're storing them. And then you don't need the CD at all. So For this week, I'm choosing DW04 lessons. I click on Open, I click on Select, and if I've made any changes, I will see a dialog box that says we're updating the cache. I click on Save, and I click on Done. And now I'm prepared to work on the textbook files. When it's time for me to do the assignment for uploading to my website, I close all of the existing files, I change my site definition, and then I start working on the files that I have for the homework that I'm going to be posting to my website. And of course, this site definition has remote server information as well. Okay? So that's the review that I wanted to make sure we had of the site definition. Any questions about the site definitions? Because I know sometimes that can be the hardest thing, the directory structures, and oh my goodness, did I redefine that, and oh, now I have 3 of these, and you know, I know that's problematic. Okay, good. So now we're ready to really talk about CSS. Okay, so on my web page for this week, it has a link to a PDF document called CSS Basics, and that's what we're going to be looking at right now. Using Dreamweaver to create page layouts with Cascading Style Sheets. So we're going to go over some fundamentals of CSS, and then I'll answer any questions about CSS. I can see that Todd had a question. Remote server and testing is selected. That's correct. For your homework, your Intro to Dreamweaver homework site, remote server and testing is selected. So the question is, oh, and Ashna already answered the question. That's what enables our pages to be uploaded when we do preview in browser. Exactly. I was going to ask that question, but Ashna beat me to the punch. So there's the answer for that. That's what enables that preview in browser to work. But I'm gonna throw in a wrinkle, just and Victoria was wondering about that too. I'm gonna throw in a wrinkle, and this is something that I covered last week. Let's say though that I was concerned when I went preview in browser that it's going to overwrite that file up on the server. The question is, what can I do when that allows me to preview this remotely, still having testing server selected, but does not overwrite the file that I'm going to be previewing? What can I do that can help that scenario? You understand what I'm saying? If I want to use this preview in browser, it's going to take this HW2 file and it's going to upload it and thus replace the one on the server, unless I do one thing. What can I do to stop this file from replacing the one on the server but still having testing server selected? Aha. So even though Ashna beat me to the answer, now I beat Todd to the question. Okay, well, since nobody's jumping up and down with the answer, I'm going to show you. If I go Edit Browser List, it takes me to the Preferences. And right in this Preferences window, and this is something that I did show you last week, in the Preferences window, you have an option of previewing using a temporary file. I'm going to click on OK to this, and watch what happens when I preview here. I'll say Preview in Chrome, and it does send the file up to the server, but look at the name of the file. TMP161FRFJ, whatever it says. Essentially what's happening is it's creating a temporary file. That's it. It creates a temporary file that does not replace the existing file. Okay? And then when I save it and upload it, it will actually use the new file. Okay? So some people like to have preview and temporary file. I like to live dangerously, so I usually do not have preview and temporary file selected. Okay, so now back to CSS basics, really back to CSS basics. So style sheets are a set of rules that provide consistent formatting or on a single web page or an entire website. Key piece of information. HTML provides the structure. CSS controls the appearance of each structured element. With CSS, the same HTML page can appear dramatically different with different style sheets. CSS Zen Garden is the perfect example of this. Here we see text that looks like this with this structure. If I go over to my web developer toolbar and I choose disable, and let's choose CSS here, and I choose disable all styles, what I see is this text. Okay? I'm going to turn that back on. And now I'm going to click on this link over here. Actually, I'll open this in a new tab. So here's our first page. Here's our second page. Okay? First page. Second page. What happens if I turn this style sheet off? Oh, okay, it's not the same page. Let me come back here and let me see here something. Okay, I think this one will work. Okay, perfect. So let me close this, go back to here, and open this one up in a new tab. So here's our first page. Here's our second page. They look dramatically different, but if I turn the styles off on both of them, you'll see they're really the same page. The text is black and white. The paragraphs are the same. The HTML structure is the same. It's only turning on the styles that makes the appearance look dramatically different. So here we have two pages that look dramatically different, but their HTML structures are exactly the same. So that's the key to understanding the importance of CSS in the development of a website. We use our HTML for our structure, and we use our CSS for our styling. In terms of what kind of style sheets there are a variety of style sheets. You have your browser default style sheets. These differ from browser to browser, which is why that same HTML page can look slightly different on different browsers. Now granted, over the years, the various browsers have gotten more compliant, so the pages look closer to the same on different browsers. It used to be a much bigger problem than it currently is. But nevertheless, the browser's own style sheet is a factor in the appearance of your website. In most modern browsers, user style sheets also allow users to apply their own style sheets. That's not something that you are going to run into too much certainly not in this class or in most other classes. That assumes that the end user has created their own style sheet, and that probably applies to like 0.01% of all of the pages viewed. But what we do in this class is we create author style sheets, okay? And that would be either an embedded style sheet, an external style sheet, or an inline style. Now, CSS can be used to present different styles for different purposes, generally called rendering methods. There's the handheld media types, the print media, projection media, screen media, TTY, which is for text telephone for hearing impaired, or TV media type as well. Some obvious advantages of CSS is it reduces the HTML file size and speeds up the page loading. It provides a lot more options than straight HTML. It facilitates the consistency of the appearance, and it meets current industry standards. The challenges of CSS-based layout is that CSS is an entire field in and of itself. There are many, many options. We have a full semester Cascading Style Sheet class. So while we learn a fair amount in Dreamweaver A and B, you certainly are going to not know everything about CSS without taking that CSS class. Are you going to cover global resets using CSS? I'm not really sure what you mean by global resets. But if you fill me in on that, I'll try to answer that question. So let's take a look at the anatomy of a CSS rule. Each rule has two main parts and two subparts. The selector, which identifies the tag in this case. It's not always a tag. Sometimes it's a class. Sometimes it's an ID. But in this case, we're looking at the H1 tag. So in this case, that's the selector. And then the declaration block. The declaration block is always inside of curly braces. And the declaration block has two sub-elements, the property, such as font weight, and the value of the property, such as bold. Okay? Keep in mind, a single selector, in this case it's the paragraph is the selector, a single rule can have a lot of properties within the declaration block. So here's our selector, the P tag, and here's the opening of our declaration block, this curly brace, and we have the property color, the value red, semicolon, the property font size, colon, the value 12px, semicolon, the property line height, colon, and the value 15px, semicolon, and then close the curly brace. So this is an example of a single rule which has multiple declarations in it. Notice that the lack of spaces and quotes in CSS rules, and declarations are separated with semicolons even at the end. You can also group your selectors and have a single rule apply to all of those selectors. So I could say H1, comma, H2, comma, H3, comma, and then open up my declaration block and apply the bold value to the font weight property. Okay? Any questions about the anatomy of the CSS rule? Oh, okay. So global selectors in terms of, that is something that we will go over. I'm not sure we'll get to it today. It is an important thing to consider, and the pages that we work on in the first few classes are already built to accommodate that. Okay, so that goes, your concern about global resets has been noted, and I will make sure to cover that at some point, but not just at this moment. So the location of CSS rules, 3 different locations. Inline styles uses the style attributed inside of a tag. These rules are most specific. I discourage you from using those. internal styles, which are in the head of the HTML document, and external styles, which are placed in a separate CSS file and linked in the head of the document. Okay? The cascade, thus the word cascading style sheets. When a browser displays a web page, it has to sort out the CSS rules coming from the browser, the user, the various author style sheets to figure out how to display the page. Sometimes these rules conflict, meaning that different rules are telling the same element or property what it should look like. The cascade determines which rule will be applied to the document. So, browser styles have the lowest priority, meaning they are only applied when not defined by another style. User styles override browsing styles. Author styles have the highest priority, overriding the other two. Within the author style, external styles have the lowest priority. Internal or heading styles are next, and finally internal inline styles have the highest priority. Okay? Now here's the thing about that. Even though external styles have the lowest priority, they're the most global, because you can link many pages to a single style sheet, right? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, thank you, Todd. Thank you, Victoria, Carol. Yep, good. Okay, Ashna, didn't forget you there. Now, what about specificity? First thing I've got to tell you about specificity is this whole selector calculator thing. Okay, I've been doing this for years, and when I see this here, my eyes just glaze over. I'd much rather experiment and just be aware of the concept that the closer the rule is and the more specific the rule is, the more likely it is going to be applied to any particular element. This whole selector thing doesn't really work well in my brain. So with that being said, let me explain the specificity of selectors. The order of CSS rules ultimately creates a complex cascade where items with higher priorities override properties that have lower priorities. The main thing that you want to understand is that IDs have the highest precedence, then classes, and finally tags. So an ID is going to be so let me give you an example of all three of those: IDs, classes, and tags. I'm going to jump into Dreamweaver, and I'm going to take this text and say, this is text. And right now, it's inside of a paragraph. If I look at all the rules for this page, I see that I have this rule applying to paragraphs. As a matter of fact, if I select current, I'll see that there are a variety of rules that apply to this element, some more directly than others. The tag paragraph is part of this rule that has no margin, but it has a padding left of 15 and a padding right of 15. Okay? This paragraph is inside of the div content, which also has a padding on the top and bottom set to it. But that's not affecting this paragraph directly. Okay? And we see that this div content is inside of div container, which has a set of rules like the background color, the margin of the container, and the width of the container. Again, the only part of that that is affecting the paragraph content somewhat indirectly is the background color of the div container. Then, of course, there's the body rule that's applying to all of it, which is determining our font itself. And that's applying to this text. But let's take a look here. What we really want to focus on is this paragraph, which is using this rule, which has the following elements in it: the padding right and left, as well as, if there's anything else in here, as well as the margin top of the margin at the top of being 0. So since paragraph is a tag, class should take precedence over that. So I'm going to create a new rule. I'm going to do that inside of the CSS style sheets. I'm going to click on this plus sign, and I'm going to say red text. And I'm going to choose a class, and then I'm going to click on OK, and simply set the text color to red, and I click on OK. Now there's no change to this yet, but if I choose the paragraph tag and I choose class and I choose red text, that takes precedence over the paragraph rules that are still being applied to this piece of text. And it's not the paragraph rules that are changing the appearance of the text, it's the body tag, which is also a tag that has my text color to be set to this forest green. But even if I went to this H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, P, even if I change this to have the type color set to a dark green, it's not going to change the color of this text because class takes precedence over tag. Okay? The next one, though, which is supposed to be more specific, is ID. What happens if I take this text, which is inside of a paragraph, I'm going to go to Code View, and I'm going to say P ID equal blue. Okay? So now I have a paragraph that has both an ID and a class being applied to it. Okay? I'm going to go back to Design View. I'm going to create a new rule, and it's going to be an ID called blue. And I'm going to choose the text color, and I'm going to make it blue. And I'll click OK, and look what happened to my text. Even though class and paragraph are all part of where this text resides. Here's this block of text called This Is Text. It sits in a paragraph and that has a class called red text being applied to it. But this paragraph also has an ID called blue, which has a property of the text being blue. So ID takes precedence over class, and class takes precedence over tag. That is extremely important in terms of understanding how these rules work. Now, in terms of this specificity here, the only thing I can tell you is that the more specific a tag is, the better it is. Let me give you an example of that in terms of specificity. So here I have this paragraph, and I'm going to actually go to Code View. I'm going to copy this paragraph. I'm going to paste this paragraph, and I'm going to go back to Design View. So both of these paragraphs look the same. They're both taking the blue color from the ID called blue. But what happens if I create another ID? I create a new rule, and that's called .container.content pound blue. What does that mean? That means that this rule is more specific. It's saying not only am I creating a rule called blue, but I'm creating a rule for the ID blue when the ID is inside of a container called content, and that content is inside of a container called container. So this is a very specific rule, more specific than simply blue. Okay, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to change the color, even though this tag is called It's called dot container dot content pound blue. We're going to change the color to this lime green just for now and click on OK. And notice they both changed to green. The reason that they changed to green is because, let's look at the styles at the top here. The reason that they changed to green is because pound blue, the color is blue, but it's less specific than this rule, which shows you the entire path to the ID. It's showing you blue when it's inside of content, when it's inside of container. This rule has greater specificity than this rule. Now, those people who are excellent at detective work and CSS in particular would say, well, wait a second, Teach. This rule occurs after this rule. So obviously what's happening here is that the color is being set to this color here, but then it's seeing another rule and changing it to this color. If that was the case, then when I move this up above here and move this rule first, I should see this change back to blue. It doesn't, because this rule here is more specific. So Anna asks, does that mean when coding CSS we should code tag first, CSS, class next, and ID? No, I don't think. You want to separate the use of those elements, tags, classes, and IDs, in terms of a bigger storyboarding process. When you create an HTML page and you start thinking about what you want your page to look like, you do define a lot of your tags first, like your heading tags and your list items and your paragraph tags. You put those all, you group those all together. And then you start creating your IDs for blocks of elements, whether it be IDs for various divs or IDs for HTML5 tags like section or header or nav. And then finally, you create your classes for things that you're applying to an as-need basis scenario. You want to group all of those together. You want to make subgroups of all of those in your style sheet. So you put all of your your tag selectors together and your ID selectors together and your class selectors together. But whether the order of those is in tag, then ID, then class, that to me makes the most sense to do it in that order. Create your tags first, and then your classes, then your IDs. Whether or not they are ordered that way within your CSS document is not going to affect how they appear on your page unless there are conflicts. The other thing to remember is the last thing that shows up on a page is if there's a conflict and they both have the same power, then it's the last one that affects the target the most. In other words, I have pound blue set to a lime green color and pound blue set to a blue color. This one is overriding this one because this is more specific. But if I took out this part of pound blue, now I have conflicting rules. And because of the fact that this rule happens after this rule, that text, when I go back, is no longer going to be green, it's going to be blue. Got it? It's like science. Yeah. It's pretty darn coolio, isn't it? Once you understand how CSS works, it is very powerful. And then, of course, you get into the CSS vortex and start doing things with all kinds of CSS properties. What happens if I try this? Oh, let me try this. And boy, oh boy, you can really start going into CSS land. Let's talk about creating styles in Dreamweaver. When we create styles in Dreamweaver, whether it be CSS4, CS4, CS5, or CS6, Dreamweaver uses two places to create those styles. One is the Property Inspector, and one is the CSS Rules dialog box. Okay, so we've covered the Property Inspector fairly extensively in the sense that we could go to the Property Inspector and change the page properties. Okay, let's go to the Property Inspector. I can choose my document, and I have two tags, Properties HTML and CS, and then I can choose Page Properties right here, and I can change the appearance of both the HTML, or you do it with CSS. I don't even know why they have this in here anymore, this appearance HTML. It should be taken out because it's deprecated code. It shouldn't even be there because we really control everything. We really control everything with in terms of appearance with CSS. But nevertheless, the page properties is one place that we design our CSS, and I can choose CSS. I can choose a different page font, font size, text color, background color, if I was using a background image, all of my margins. And all of this applies to the body tag that shows up right over here. Background color, color, font, margin, and padding. Okay? And sometimes if I started going here and saying, in addition, I want to choose my, say, links. No, let's say, okay, headings. And I click on OK. It creates these set of rules. What I'm trying to do, though, is get the page properties to create another set of rules that have not happened yet. Let's say, not headings. It should be over here. That's a background color. Usually it creates some stuff having to do with TD and TH and LI, list items and that type of thing. And I'm not seeing that I can do that with the appearance right here. Okay, let me try one other thing. Here's my page. I've got CSS selected. Oh, there, right there. Targeted rule, body, TD, TH. It's a compound rule, and it is actually showing up right here. I'm going to move it up in my list. So we can see that the text color that I'm applying is applying to all of the text in my body, but also in table data and table header. Okay, and that just happens by default when you are creating a page property that has to do with your font set and your font color. It applies it to not only your body but your table data and table header as well. One thing that you just noticed when I created these additional rules by going to the page properties in the properties panel is it popped them the new rules down at the bottom. But if I want to reorder this as per what Anna was saying in terms of how we order our rules, I can take my tags and just drag it right up. Okay? And now if I go to my code view, I'll see that those rules are organized just like I have them in my CSS styles window. In other words, body shows up first, and then body TD, TH, the same in code view. Okay? So, the compound rules, I'll make sure I cover that a little bit more. So, the controlling of the HTML from the properties panel is down over here. The controlling of the controlling of the styles from the properties panel is down over here. The controlling of the styles from the styles panel happens up over here. And there are two modes. I've talked about these already. There's the all mode, which shows every rule that's being applied. Then there's the current mode, which means that when I select a certain element, it shows what rules are being applied to that element. So for example, if I select this element up here, which is the H1 tag, it shows that, you've got H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, P, those rules are being applied, and then you've got H1 specifically, which is having this rule being applied. Okay, so the CSS styles current mode allows you to focus in more on specifically what you're doing. If I select this link over here, we see that, okay, the rules that are applying to this link include ulnav hover, ulnav, I can't even see this, so let me open it up. ulnav active, ulnav focus. But also, we've got ulnav visited, we've got hover, we've got a whole bunch of different rules that may be applying. Then we've got the list item rule that's applying, we've got the container that's in applying, and this is where CSS gets complicated, because you have to think which tag is closest to that text. So link 4, you can see there's my anchor tag, there's my list item tag, there's my nav tag, and there's my sidebar tag. There are rules that are applying to each of those elements. The closer we get to the element that I have specified, the more powerful the rule. Okay? The other thing about the CSS styles panel, aside from the all mode and the current mode, is how do you create a new rule from this window? We click on New CSS Rules, and we choose our selector type. Are we going to create a class? Are we going to create an ID? Are we going to create a tag? And finally, are we going to create a compound rule? And that's something that Anna is asking about here. What a compound rule is when you have a rule that's based on what you've got selected within Dreamweaver when you launch the new CSS rules dialog box. In other words, right now I have the anchor tag selected, and I have an anchor that's inside of a list item, that's inside of an unordered list called nav, that's inside of a div called sidebar1, that's inside of a container, that's inside of body. Okay? So the rule that's created is a very specific compound rule. And working from left to right is going from the biggest container down to the most specific. So it says dot container space dot sidebar1 space dot nav space dot li space a. That means when the anchor is inside of a list item, inside of a class called nav, inside of a class called sidebar, inside of a class called container, then this rule applies. This is an incredibly specific rule. So chances are that this, if I create a rule right here, it's going to be only, essentially what we're saying is only apply this not to all anchors, not to all hyperlinks, but just to hyperlinks which are in a list which are in the nav unordered list that are in the sidebar. Okay? So compound CSS rules are very, very specific. Okay? So we want to keep that in mind when we're creating CSS styles. And we also want to keep in mind that the easiest and, in my opinion, most effective way to create CSS styles is to go into the CSS styles panel and click on that plus sign. Now, in this case, there are lots of rules that are applying to this anchor tag that already exist. So I can select that anchor tag from the tag selectors on the bottom left-hand corner of my Dreamweaver document window, and then I can choose Edit Rule, and it shows me what's being applied already to a hover, a active, and a focus. And essentially what's being applied is that the color of the text is going to be white when I focus on this text, when I hover over this text, and when this text is active. Okay? Let's see that in practice. Here's my rules. I click on Live. When I roll over that text, it's a hover. When I click on it, it's a active. And both times, the text becomes white. Okay? So we see that we see a couple of things here. We see how specific that rule was. We also see how we can edit it from the CSS style sheet. And we finally see that in live mode, we actually have essentially a previewing within Dreamweaver of how it appears in a browser, specifically the Chrome and Safari browsers, because that's the engine that Dreamweaver is using to render this page within Dreamweaver. Okay, so we've got CSS Styles panel, and we've got the Property Inspector. I'm going to get out of live mode because a lot of things get grayed out in live mode. So our Properties Inspector is one place that we can edit and define CSS rules, and our CSS Styles panel is the other. We've looked at new rules. We've looked at edit rules. What about this link right here? This is when you want to attach an external style sheet. Okay? So really what we've done at this point is we have reviewed how you can create the CSS rules both in the Properties panel and in the CSS panel. Now, let me be a little more specific in terms of these kinds of CSS selectors. We already covered this to a fairly specific extent, but just to review it quickly, the type selector, which is also called the tag selectors. This is assigned to a specific HTML tag. If I was in Dreamweaver and I wanted to create one of these, I could say plus, click on tag, and then I can click on this drop down and I can find all of the tags that I could apply to a rule to. So if I wanted to apply a rule to the image tag, I can click on OK. I can say, make sure that anytime you see an image tag that it has a dashed line around it for whatever reason. And then all of a sudden, when I go into live view, where's my rule? Let me go back to all for a second. There's my IMG tag, a thin dashed line. It's not showing up on this image even though I've got an image there. Is there something overriding it? Well, it shouldn't be because it's very specific there, unless there's a image right here which says border none. Ah, here's a perfect example. Look at these two rules. I'm going to group them together. I'll move this one up. Come on, move. There we go. Let's go to code view now. Right here, we see I just created a rule for the IMG because I wanted to demonstrate creating a type selector or a tag selector rule. I'm setting border to thin dashed and this kind of greenish color, and it happens after A space IMG. But since A space IMG is a compound rule, it's more specific, then border none overrides that. If I remove this rule or comment it out, several ways I can do this here, I can actually disable this rule. Let me go back into design view. I'll select this and I'll say AIMG, and I'll disable it by clicking on this little icon in the properties panel here. Then now if I go into design view, look what we see. We see a dotted line around that image. Let me zoom in on that a little bit so you can see that better. So you can see now there's a dotted line around that image. Because even though the A image rule is more specific than the IMG rule, I disabled it within the properties panel. So this is a way that you can test what's going on simply by disabling a rule. And now I enable that rule, and now that dotted line is gone. Okay? So that's why SRJC has a full semester for CSS. Yep. Troubleshooting, will it always take 3 declarations? I'm really not sure exactly what you mean by that. Maybe you can help me out there. But I'll move on and get more specifics and then answer that question. So that's the type selector, also known as the tag selector. Then we have the class. Class selectors can apply to many different elements on a page. They are not associated with any tag, but they are applied on an as-need basis. Each class selector must have a unique name, regardless of whether you put a period before it when you create a class selector. Dreamweaver will add that period if you forget to type it. Okay? Then we have ID selectors. Examples of ID selectors are on div tags or anchor tags. You can put it on paragraph tags. You can make anything an ID. And IDs are more powerful than classes. The only thing about an ID, though, is that you can only apply an ID one time on a page. So if I have an ID called content, I can only use that ID once on a page. In the case you had A space image, thin dotted, when it comes to borders, you always have 3 properties. So Todd was asking about 3 declarations. It's not 3 declarations, it's 3 properties. So if I go back to this here and I look at this rule and I look at it in code view, what you see, it says IMG border colon thin dashed, and that's the value. So these are 3 different properties that apply to the border. These are 3 different values that apply to the border property. Okay? Okay. So back to where we were in our kinds of selectors. We've got types, we've got classes which override types, we've got IDs which override classes, and finally we've got compound and contextual selectors. Compounds are like what I showed you, where something descends from something else, like H1 when it's inside a footer, or IMG when it's inside of an anchor tag, right? Those are that's one example of a compound selector. Groups, you can group selectors like H1, H2, H, H3. That's a type of a compound selector. It's more commonly referred to as grouped selectors. Okay? And then you've got pseudo classes, A::hover, A colon active, A colon visited, etc. These are styled according to their positions or roles in the document, and the compound part is preceded by a colon. So A colon hover, you always have a colon because the A stands for anchor, and there's lots of different ways that an anchor is being affected. It's when you hover over it, it's one thing. When you click on it, it's another thing, A active. When you've already clicked on it, it's a third thing, A colon visited. Okay? We talked about the CSS rules definition dialog box. We've talked about creating complex styling using the rule definition dialog box. And we have, now I'm going to talk to you about the various categories. Okay? So, but before we do that, why don't we do this? It's 11:01. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back. We'll cover all of these categories. I'll show you how all of these categories play out in a document, and then we'll answer whatever questions and then make sure that the homework that you have for next week is clear and understandable. So let's take our 10-minute break now, and everybody can get a little stretch. Okay, we're back from our 10-minute break, and where we left off was looking at the CSS rules definition dialog box. We're going to make sure that we cover all of the categories that are within that dialog box. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 categories within the CSS rules definition dialog box. In terms of our semester class, we're going to be dealing with the type category, background, block, box, border, list, and positioning. Almost all of the categories. The extensions category we're not going to really get into in this class. That's something we look forward to do in the advanced class. So let's talk about starting with the type categories. The type categories groups many but not all of the properties that affect the appearance of your type, including the font family, the font style, the line height, which determines the amount of space between each line of the paragraph. It's similar to lettering in the print world. The font weight, the font variant, which refers to like normal and small caps, that kind of thing, and color. Let's take a look at that in practice. Here I am in Dreamweaver. I'm going to get rid of some rules here. And it's grayed out because I'm in live view. So let me kill some rules. Come on. Let me go to all. It's not letting me kill rules. I want to be a rule killer here. There we go. There's another. Kill some other rules that I put in here. This one. Yep. Okay. So I got rid of some rules. Notice that my setup of rules are my tags, then some pseudo links and compound rules that are specific to tags, then my classes, then I have some compound rules that are specific to tags within classes, then I finally have some classes down at the bottom. And remember, these classes are applied on an as-need basis. Now, we're talking about those specific categories, so let's look at rules that are related to the paragraph. And I'm going to kill another one of these rules that I've got in here, this P blue red text effect. It's, wow, why is it still showing up here? Oh, it's dot red text. Okay, so let me select this text here and go to HTML and say no class is being applied here. And the same thing here, no class. And by default now, it's applying the content because it's part of that element, right? It's contained within content. But let's say I wanted to create a more specific rule for this paragraph right here. I could select New CSS Rules, and I'm going to call this, I'm going to make this a compound rule, but it's going to be called, it shouldn't be called that. Let's get right in here. Select paragraph. It looks like I still have some rule in here. Let's go to code view. Yeah, it's got ID blue, even though I don't have a blue ID anymore. I killed the rule, but I didn't kill the ID within the text. Okay, get rid of that rule. Go back to design view. There's my paragraph tag. I'm going to create a new rule for this paragraph. And now it's saying, here is your compound rule. Paragraph when it's inside of content, when it's inside of container. I click on OK. And now we see those categories: type, background, block, box, border, list, position, extensions, and transition. Transition is new to CS 5 and 6. It's another one that we cover in the advanced class. So in type category, we see that we can change the font family. So if I was going to apply a serif font, I can click on apply, and I'm going to see this text change. Okay. I can change my font size. I can change my font weight, my text transform, my variant, my color, my font style, and finally my line height. Something about line height. Generally, when I define my line height, I do it in ems, and I assume that a 1.5, I like 1.5 line spacing between each line of text. So that means I usually set my paragraph ems to 1.6 em. And what we should see is a little bit of a shift here. Oh, it's actually perfect as it is, but let's see what would happen if I made this 1.8 ems. Okay, it just makes things a little bit more readable when we put a little space in between each paragraph. Okay, so we use this category to make all of these different changes. Okay, I'm going to click OK. If you click cancel, by the way, too late. It's already done it. So I'm going to throw this rule away because we're going to keep on looking at these different categories and applying rules as we go along. So that takes care of the type category. The next category is the background category. Let's see, let me make sure I get it. Yep. The next category is the background category. You can see that it not only does it relate to the background color, but if you had a background image as well. Let's look at that real fast. Generally, a background category I wouldn't be applying to this paragraph. I'd be applying it maybe more to like content. So I'll select the div content tag, and it's already got some rules applied to it. So instead of creating a new rule, I'm going to be editing the rule and examining the background category through editing the rule. Okay, so here's my background category, and it doesn't really have that much stuff in it. Background color. Okay, you see how the background color affects things. Background image. Okay, this is a tiny image and it's going to look awful, but I'm just showing you how a background image works. So right now, even though we have a background color of white, if I say background image and I point to a little, any kind of image, then by default this background image is going to repeat along the X and the Y axis. So I click on Apply, and there we go, wallpaper, right? If you wanted to have a background image like a little stripe along the side or something, then you would choose to have the background repeat in one direction. So I might say background repeat X. And then when I click on here, I have like some wallpaper just along the top. Or I can say repeat it along the top, but repeat it along the X-axis, but position it at the bottom. Okay? So I'm saying background repeat it along the X-axis, but position it along the Y-axis to the bottom. So what I've done is I've used my background category, and I've applied a background color which gets overridden by the background image, and then I can control the placement of the background image by using both background repeat and background position. I'm not sure about what is this because you already selected Apply question. Okay. The last thing that is interesting about background is this fixed versus scroll. So let me show you this in a different context here. Usually you see fixed versus scroll when you have background on a page. So I'm going to select the body tag, and I'm going to choose Edit the Rule. Not this body rule, this one, because there are two rules. One's specific for the body, and one's for the body, the table data, and the table header. So I'm going to choose Body. I'm going to choose Edit. And remember, we're talking about the background category. And specifically, I'm talking about background image. And specifically, I'm talking about background attachment. So I'm going to find a background image, and I'm going to have to browse out to a different one of my websites where I might have some big images. So let's see where I have a nice big image. How big is this? Oh, really big. Oh, this is an old poster from the 60s, Sam the Sham. Okay? Now, I'm going to say background does not repeat because it's hecka big. And we're going to start this image in the top left-hand corner. But the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to fixed. I'm going to click on OK. Now when I preview this page, and hit refresh. Oh, come on. Give me the background. Oh, it's because the file wasn't uploaded. Okay, fine. Actually, that's a great teachable moment. When you create a background image on a page, even though I'm supposed to be uploading my file with its dependent files, Dreamweaver doesn't know that the background image is one of the dependent files. So you'd have to upload that as well. Let me see if I can, what am I going to do here? Let me try it this way. Put this file. Yes to all. Yep, there it goes. It's putting the background. So now we have to see it, preview it. This time we should see it with the background. There we go. So now, if I had more content in this page, you'll see about scrolling set to fixed. So I'm going to put some content in this page. Okay, I'm going to save it. I'm going to preview it. So now when I scroll this page, the background stays fixed. Okay, so that's what happens. All of that just to see that. But it was worth it, wasn't it? So let's go back to body, edit, body, edit. So that's what happens when you set the background attachment to fixed. That background stays in one place while the rest of the page scrolls. How did you get that content? I missed that. Okay, I had an image in a different one of my websites, and I just browsed to where that image was, and then I said, use that as my background image. The more important part of that, to me, that I was trying to show you, is that by setting the background attachment to fixed, that's what allows our background to stay in one place on the screen, even if the page has a lot of content and you're scrolling the page. So if you're doing some kind of branding thing with an image, then that's when this would play in. Let me explore this a little further with you, and I'll actually do a little branding here. I'm going to double click on this image to launch it in Photoshop for a second, and I'm going to resize it that way. Because by resizing this, I'm going to be able to have a little bit, it's going to make a lot more sense for you. I'm going to go image, image size, and my width is 1941 and my height is 2700. I'm going to make my width 1200, and I'm going to click OK. I'm going to now say File, Save for Web, and I'm going to save it in that images folder as BG22 and replace the existing one. Now I can exit out of Photoshop and re-upload that image. And now when I preview this page again, come on, you can do this. Fine. When I preview that page again, oh, come on. The server is not happy with me. Let's go back. And when I preview that page again, you can do it. It's supposed to work. Okay, this is why sometimes I don't like using the preview with temporary file feature. Now, when I preview that page again, now I'm not previewing the background, I'm previewing the darn page. Here's the page, HTML, HW2, HTML2, preview. When I preview that page, we see this scroll like this. Why is this cut off? This should be going all the way across because it's bigger than what we're seeing. Oh, there we go. That looks nicer. Okay. We see that that page is doing that. Now, when a branding scenario comes into play, you would probably have your background showing up nicer. So let me show you one other little thing that we can do here. I can go to my container div, and I'm getting a little off task here because I'm trying to show you some cool things. I'm going to go to my container div, and I'm going to edit the rule by going to code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some opacity. So I can say Moz opacity .8 and then dash WebKit dash opacity .8 and then opacity .8. Now, it looks like I have 3 different rules that apply to opacity, and that's because since this is a fairly new rule, we have to create multiple rules to accommodate multiple browsers. Let's see how this plays out. Preview. There we go. So you see how now we're starting to see the background coming through. And this is an example how sometimes you see websites where they use a background. Now they're not going to use my old Sam and the Pharaohs poster, Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs poster. That looks all kind of old, unless they're trying to do something retro. But the point is that this was all done in service of examining the properties of the background category, specifically background attachment. Setting background attachment to fixed is a way that people create a background on a page and use it as a branding element. And then I did some other things on top of that, like I changed the opacity of this foreground element so it lets the background come through a little bit. Putting the Ipsum text as a placeholder is, yes, I did that just so you can see how I can, add content to a page real quickly. And I'll talk to you about that lorem ipsum text in a little bit. But let me get back on task. That was a fun bird walk, but it was a bird walk nonetheless. Let me get back on task and talk to you a bit more about the categories. We talked about now 2 categories. We've talked about the type category. We've talked about the background category. Let's talk about the block category. So the block category defines spacing and alignment, includes things like word spacing, letter spacing, vertical alignment, text index, text indent, white spacing, and display properties. Out of all of those properties, probably the most important 2 are the text alignment, just because we see that play out in a lot of CSS designs, and the display property. So let's take a look at that. I'm back to my paragraph tag, and let's see, my current rule is right there, and let's say I edited this rule. If I go to the block category, I can adjust my word spacing. In other words, I can space it out a little bit more. So if I said word spacing, let's say 1M. Oh, come on. Paragraph. I just want to select the paragraph tag right there. There we go. Edit the rule. Go down to block. Set the word spacing. I'm going to set it to 2 M's just for a second here. I don't know why that's not applying. What am I doing? Okay, let me just create a new rule just because I want to be real specific here. So I'll select this paragraph, and I'll say new rule, and I'll say when paragraphs show up in content that show up in container. That's fine. Now I'm going to go to the block category and look at word spacing. So if I said 2M, it should space those words out much further apart. Let's say if I go to letter spacing, 0.5M, then my letters are going to be way spaced like that. So this is applying to your letter spacing. So if you're essentially trying to almost center justify your text, you can do it that way. We don't usually do anything like that. Vertical alignment has to do, generally, we wouldn't be applying this type of thing to a paragraph. Text alignment clearly could apply here. Okay. Last one is display. And display is really important because by default, most tags have a display property already applied to them. For example, a paragraph tag. A paragraph tag is a block level element. In other words, it displays as a block. A list item also displays as a block. But let's say specifically for a list item, we wanted to create some type of scenario where we see a horizontal list. Okay, so let me just create a real quick horizontal list. Link 1, link 2, link 3. Okay, or lunk 1, lunk 2. Okay, so I'm going to select these three. I'm going to choose these and say this is a list, right? So it's these are a list now. Let's try that again. List. There we go. These are a list now, but if I want them to go horizontally like I see in a lot of sites, what I would do is I would have to create a new rule, and that's going to be when this unordered list shows up in the header, I'm going to go to the block and say, I don't want this to display as a block. I want it to display in line. And when I click on apply, notice what happened. Link 1, link 2, link 3. They go across like that. So the display property is what takes an element and changes if it goes across the screen or shows up as a block. And like I said, most tags already have that rule being applied to it, so you have to make adjustments in your display property to change, for example, how a list works, and then you can start defining that list and turning it into something more interesting. So let's just continue along those lines. Let's say I wanted to go to the box category, right? And I could say that I want each of these list elements to have a padding of 5. I click on apply, and now that list has a padding of 5. I want it to have a margin of 5, and I click on apply, and then it's creating some margin. I want it to have a border, and I click on apply, and we see that what I'm doing is I'm creating rules from these three categories, which I just jumbled together and I covered quickly, but I will review them now. And I created a rule for this list item that applies to this list inside of the header to make it look more like kind of buttons. So getting back to this block set of rules, word spacing, letter spacing, vertical alignment, and text alignment are pretty self-evident. The display is super important when you want to control certain things like list items, because by default the list item is a block level element. If I take out display inline and I click on apply, these links will all of a sudden show up as block level elements. Okay, so it's changing that display to an inline that gives me a lot of control. I go to the category box, and you already see some very basic concepts that are that you should be familiar with from your HTML classes. Your padding and your margin, and then I didn't cover these with height, float, and clear yet, but I will momentarily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on OK here. I'm going to just get rid of some stuff that I did here. I'm going to get rid of this list. I'm going to get rid of these links. And I'm going to go back to visit the block level, the block category. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to choose div content. And there's already a rule for div content. I'm going to get rid of this rule here. I'm just going to go straight to the content rule, which should be right there. And I'm going to click on edit. Okay, here's my content rule. And we've looked at the type category, the background category, the block category. We're down now to the box category. And we've looked already at the padding. Let me make some adjustments to the padding and let's just see what happens. If I say padding same for all, then the top, right, bottom, and left will all be set to 10. And if I click on apply, you won't see it because we can't see the top and the bottom, but it's going to create, oh, it did do something. It created a padding at the top and the bottom within the container. So we see the padding on the sides, and now there's also padding on the top and the bottom. If I set a margin, then this container will have a margin on the outside. The main thing to remember about padding versus margin is padding is on the inside of an element, margin is on the outside of an element. Okay? You can see already that this box has a width set to 780. If I pull that width out and I click on apply, it's going to go all the way across the screen. Because by default, a container has a width of 100%. I'm taking out the float as well right now, and what we're seeing without that being floated is we're seeing that this container goes 100% across the screen. This container called content goes 100% across the screen, and when we click in here and get the content div selected, you can see in design view, we can see that padding on the outside, on the inside, I'm sorry, right? And the padding on the top. And if I went inside here and let's say I'll do it right in this view, I'll click on add a property and I'll click margin. And I set it to 10 px, we'll see, look at the new visual that we see in design view. I see my padding on the inside, I see my margin on the outside. Okay? So our properties that are related to background, the background category, show up in our display also, like our padding, like our margin. Let me edit this rule and get back to width, float, height, and clear. Normally, if I was going to turn this into 2 columns, which we did have here, I would set my width, in this case 780 pixels. If I click on apply, then now it's set to 780 pixels. But if I wanted to have this set up side by side with this column, I would float this to the left and click on apply. And it's not floating to the left because of the fact that I added some margin here. So I'm going to get rid of the margin and click on apply. And now if I go to click on OK, but I'd have to go to live view to see this. Well, I'm at 200%. Let's go back to 100%. Oh, geez. What happened was I did something funky with the letter spacing here. Where did I do that? Paragraph. Current. Word spacing. Yeah, get rid of that. There we go. Margin top 0. Padding left 15. Let me get rid of that and that. And now with this floating, it should float to the left of this container. I better look at my values here. My div container value is set to a width of 780. What's my div? My div content value is 780. Let's see what my link, my nav, my sidebar is set to. My sidebar is set to 180. So 780 and 180 is 960. Let's see my container here. It's set to 960. Let me just set this to 980 so I can make sure that we get exactly what I want you to see, which is now, is this making sense as I go along? I go a little fast, but I'm trying to describe to you what's happening as I'm going along here. What we did was, it's all in the context of learning about these categories of CSS. And what I did was, as I examined this content category and I edited the rule, I had added some padding and added some margin, and we saw how that looked in design view. But what I also did was I removed the width and I removed the float, and then it popped this content below. I added this width back in, I added the float back in, and I adjusted the size of the overall container to contain the width of both this content div and the width of this sidebar div. So the two of those numbers, the two of the width numbers combined should be less than the container. And that way, this div that we call content would float next to the sidebar. The big takeaway there is that obviously there are a lot of categories for us to play with, but when you have two columns that you want to have side by side, the value of the width of this column and the width of the other column has to be less than the container, taking into account margins and paddings. Okay? So some people are saying it's a good speed. Some people are saying it's very fast. Good. Let's do this. Let me cover just a couple of more categories, and then we'll review the whole CSS rules definition dialog box. So we've looked at the type category, the background category, the block category, and the box category. The border category is pretty straightforward. Here is our content div, and since we're in live view, when I change this, we're going to see immediate changes. I'm going to set a solid, thin, blue line around the content div. I click on apply, and it kicked it down only because that extra pixel just caused the combination of all the borders and all the pixel numbers to be greater than the container. So let me go to the box category and set the width to 770, and we should see this kick back up. There we go. Border essentially has three values that are applying to that property: style, width, and color. And I apply that border to all of the sides. Of course, I can apply it to top, right, bottom, and left individually. Okay? Let's continue on. I'm going to click on OK here and just make a little change in my code and turn this into a list. This is a list. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take these elements, turn it into a list. Okay. Select div content div, go back to live view, edit this specifically as it's related to list. So what's inside of the list category? Well, the first thing is the list style type. If I want to make this into a disk, I just click here. If I want to turn it into a circle, if I want to turn it into a square, I should see an update here. I'm not seeing the update. That's interesting. If I wanted to get rid of it altogether, click on OK. Why is that not applying? Oh, because I was doing it to the container. Wait a second. Let's look here. What's going on? Content UL, content OL. Oh, there's some rules that are conflicting. So let me go in here and examine the rule specifically as, close as a more specific rule. So this goes back to where we started earlier. I just created a rule for lists within the content div. But if I have a more specific rule like this one, .content space OL or .content space UL, it's going to override that rule. So now we're going to see this happen. List style type, let's say I say square. Okay, none. Oh, none worked, but square didn't. So that means that we're not rendering fully accurately inside of Dreamweaver, because we should see circles. Yep, we see the circles. We see squares. Yeah, I guess we do see squares. They just don't look that different than discs. Yep. So yeah, we are seeing the updating within the live view in Dreamweaver, but the disk looks almost identical to the square. Okay? The main thing and the most common thing is when you're working with lists, there are times that you have no little indicators that it's a list. And that, again, happens very often when we're using lists for hyperlinks. Other types of things are you can create a list style image. So if I wanted to have a image showing up next to these, I could probably, let's see if I can browse to one here. This is kind of cool if I can do this. Boy, I'd love to fly by the seat of my pants because I certainly didn't plan to use this feature. Images. There we go. Let's see if I can see that image. Oh, that's too big. Where's my little tiny image? Okay, we'll use this little preview button. Okay, and click on apply. Look at that. So those become my little list buttons, right? And of course I can position them inside or outside. Okay, so these are some of the properties that you can experiment with. You can apply your own little list style images if you wanted to have little images that were like a little logo or something like that. Get cutesy with that. Rare for people to do that kind of thing, but very often it is common to use the list style type. Finally, so we've covered type, background, block, box, border, and list. The last one has to do with positioning. And this one, it can also be fairly common if, let's say, you want to have a box with a height. So we've seen in the box category, there's a width and a height setting. Width by default is going to be defined as 100%. Okay? Well, we're looking in the wrong tag. Let me go back to here, go to the content div, and edit it from there. So we're looking at the box category and how it relates to the positioning category. The box category allows us to set a width. By default, the width is going to be 100%. Sometimes people want to set a height because they want all of the information on a page to appear what's called above the fold, all in one screen. So whereas the height of one screen is typically around 600, if I set the height to be 600 and then I click on OK, when I preview this page, I lost my mouse. When I preview this page, I lose some of that text, but that text is still there. That's where the category positioning comes into play. Because if I want to set a specific height, I'm trying to go for content here. There we go. If I want to set a specific height, I would go to positioning, and I would want to make sure that anything that overflows beyond the height that I have set for that container will eventually appear. In other words, this text in this container goes on for like 2,000 pixels, but it's getting cut off after 600 pixels because of the fact that I set a height to the container. If I want to see the rest of that text, I have to control the overflow property, and I do that from the positioning category. So if I set overflow to auto, and I click on apply, and then I click on OK, all of a sudden we see the scroll bar. Whoa, is that a lot or what? So now we get to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes looking at, make sure I have the right categories here, looking at the various categories inside of the CSS rules: type, background, block, box, border, list, and positioning. We've got 7 different categories with all kinds of properties within those categories that I just dumped on you. But now I am completely available for you to ask any questions that you want related to that. Okay, so Anna asks, how small do the little images need to be for bullets? I would say shoot for a number like 25 pixels, even 20 pixels. Just okay. Todd is trusting the force with luck, or Luke, depending upon the day of the week. Other questions related to the CSS rule definition dialog box, which is a huge box filled with all these. It's like a Russian. It's the Russian set of boxes where there are boxes inside of boxes inside of boxes. So while you're thinking of your questions, let me just review these 7 categories. And I keep an eye on the chat window as I do this. Category 1, type. Our font family, our font size, our weights, all the variants. This text decoration, I didn't cover this. This is very often when you're dealing with hyperlinks. If you're going to create a rule for a hyperlink, you would probably go to the type category if you didn't want that hyperlink to be underlined by default. The background category, where this is a rule that generally is set to a container or the body tag, where we'd set the color of the container or the body tag, where we would apply a background image, and then if we wanted that background image to repeat or not repeat. If we wanted it not to repeat, we would have to say no repeat, because by default it's going to repeat along both the X and the Y axis. We can also control whether that background is attached to the browser display. In other words, the rest of the page will move, but the background won't, and that would be setting the background attachment to fixed. Or if you don't do anything with it, it automatically has a value of scroll. Then we set the background position along the x-axis, that's horizontal, and along the y-axis, that's vertical. And then our next, how about placeholder text? Okay. Our next category, I'll get to that. Our next category is category block. This is where we deal with our word spacing, our letter spacing, our alignment, our text alignment, and the vertical alignment has to do with text within a container. So let's say this text down here where it says Jeffrey Diamond, if I wanted to align this to the bottom of that container, I would select vertical align and then set it to bottom, something like that. Okay, that becomes relevant especially when you're dealing with tables and where the text is positioned in a table that has unequal text lengths for each of the columns. Then you've got your white space and the display values. The display property is very important. As I said earlier, normally elements have either a default property of display set to inline or a default property of display set to block. And you can change those within this category here. Okay? Then we have the box category. This is where we're going to set our width, which is default 100%. If we put in a pixel value here, that's because it's to adjust the width of the container in the context of our overall page. On some occasions, people set a height if they want all of the content on a page to show up in the first screenful of somebody's display. You also can control floats of containers, and that's something that we get into. You even get into it in this next week's assignment. That being the case, and since we're still talking about CSS rules, I'm going to share with you how that works. So here is this. Okay, come on. Let me deselect something here. There we go. Here is, why is it selecting the whole thing when I'm in design view? It shouldn't select the whole thing when I'm in design view. Oh, I see what's going on. Here's my image, and as I said, in the category of box, we see there's a float element. If I wanted this image to float alongside of this text, I would select float, and I can choose to float it right, in which case there it's floating over here, or I can choose floating it left, in which case it's floating over here. If I wanted it to show up right at the end here, I would actually drag it right to here, and then it's floating to the left there. If I wanted to float it to the right, I would just change this to float right. Okay, so this is a way that you can control how your images are appearing within a container, and that's the float image of the box category. We have looked at padding and margin. The importance of the padding is, remember, padding's on the inside, margin's on the outside, but padding adds to the width of a container. So even if this container was set to 800, if I had a padding of 10 right and 10 left, then the width of this container is actually 820 when I think of it in the overall size. Border is pretty straightforward. We have style, width, and color. List is pretty straightforward. We can control the list style type as well as the position, and if we're going to use a different list image. Finally, positioning. For now, positioning is most relevant when we set a height to a container and then want to have additional text within that container show up. We would normally select Overflow Auto. Overflow Scroll means that it would show a scroll bar regardless of whether or not we need it. Overflow Hidden means that even if there's 3,000 pixels of data in a container that's 50 pixels high, we're not going to see any of the rest. And then Overflow Visible is the default setting. We don't have to declare it. So Those are all of the categories in review. It's a lot, but gives a great picture of overall capacity. Placeholder text, Dreamweaver uses a different name. Okay, did we cover the homework? Thank you for those reminders. So now, let's just take a look at our page here. We covered all of the categories. We talked about IDs. We talked about classes. I want you to make sure to review this document, just because I didn't cover every single element within here, and it's a good idea for you to do that. Okay? Now, let's go and see if there's everything on today's page that has been covered, and then jump into covering the homework as well. My screen is white because my connection sometimes takes a minute for some reason. There we go. Here we are in Dreamweaver assignment. So we covered CSS basics. We created CSS rules. We looked at classes. We looked at contextual rules. We did not create any pseudo classes, but we will do that in next class. We looked at IDs. We looked at this. We're going to cover real quickly, and we're going to cover this real quickly too. I say quickly because these two are things that you're familiar with, and we did look at the difference between embedded and external. But I do want to cover this div tag and CSS IDs, and I can do that in 5 minutes, and then we'll jump to the homework. So I'm going to close this page. I'm going to create an HTML page that has nothing in it. Now, what is a div? A div is a block level element that has no other values ascribed to it. If I wanted to create a bunch of boxes on this page, I would say insert, and then I would say layout object and choose div tag. And I'm going to give this ID header, and I'm just going to click on OK. Now I'm going to do that several more times. Insert layout object div tag, and I'll give this a definition, nav. Whoopsie, that one didn't work right because I didn't do something that I needed to do. Insert div tag, and I want it to be after the tag header, and I want it to have an ID of nav. So I had to say after the tag header and give it an ID of nav. I'm going to do two more. Insert layout object div tag after the tag nav, and call it content. Then I'm going to choose insert layout object div tag again after the tag content. We'll call it footer. And finally, one more, and I'm going to select through all of these, and I'm going to say insert layout object div tag wrapped around what's selected, and I'm going to call this ID container, and click on OK. Now I look at my code structure. Here's my container. It has a div called header, a div called nav, a div called content, and a div called footer. They all have an ID applied to them. I would only be using this ID once per page. But this, my friends, is really the entire structure of a typical web page. You have a container with a header div, which contains a logo and some branding elements. You have a container with an ID called nav, which contains your navigation. You have a div called ID, which contains the main content of the page, and then you have an ID called footer, with a div called footer, and that's where you've got your copyright elements and that type of stuff. That's really your entire web page. All the rest has to do with styling it, okay? And then adding content to each of these div elements. So when it comes to div tags and CSS IDs, you create your basic structure and then you start styling it around that structure. Now in terms of embedded versus external style sheets, we know that, and I showed you this last class, I'll open up homework number 2. If I look at this page, and right now I'm jumping to the next element in my list of things that we're supposed to cover today, embedded versus and external style sheets. And this is a little bit of review because we've talked about this multiple times. Right here, inside of Dreamweaver, on this page, I see all of these rules. Are these embedded or external? They're embedded. That's correct. If we look at the code, they're in the head of the document. Okay? If we wanted to make this an external style sheet, it's a very easy thing to do. I showed you this last week. I select the first rule. I hold the Shift key. I go down to the very last rule. I right-click. I choose Move CSS Rules. I put it on a new style sheet. I click OK. I give a name for that style sheet. I would be putting it in a folder called CSS. And since this is just for this one page, I'm just going to call this CSS file HW2. And notice what it does. It shows me that the CSS styles are within a document called hw2.css. And in my page view, we see that now I am linking to that page. The embedded style tag is now empty, so I can go to my CSS styles panel and I could remove that empty style tag. And now I see that I have my link to this CSS style sheet, which is where all of my rules are located. External style sheets are further away from your HTML, but they're more global, so they can affect as many pages as I want to affect. So that's embedded and external style sheets. Div tags and CSS IDs, I saw there was a question about that, and the question was, I thought you could only use an ID once on a page. Yes, I am only using each of these IDs once. The ID is header, the next ID is nav, the next ID is content, and the next ID is footer. I can use the word ID as many times as I want. That is a property, and that is I'm using ID to define different elements on a page. Okay, does that make sense to you, Sidnaya? Yeah, okay. So I thought you can only, the rest, don't think I had issues watching it. What's happening with scroll when people use more what? What's happening with scroll when people use more what? We're taking a little breather here. Don't worry about the homework because it's so super easy. You're just going to be like, whoa, that's it? Okay. And plus I'm going to be finishing. I'm going to have it all locked up within 2 or 3 minutes. From what you're saying, they have height defined for several content boxes. Right. Yeah. So, as I said earlier, when you look at certain websites, when you look at certain websites, oh geez, where should I find one of these? Let me go here. CSS. When we look at certain websites, if they're, oh, this is a really boring one. When we look at certain websites, we see a page just scrolls and scrolls and scrolls. It's got tons and tons and tons of content on it. So that's the scroll bar there. But if I wanted to create a container here, just for this portion, I can make this a box and have the scroll bar there instead of on the outside. So you get various pages that deal with those ideas differently. Let's see if I can find a page. This has a scroll box like that as well. Here, I'll try one thing. Container fixed height example. Okay, so let's see. Oh, they're not giving me much there. Fixed. This is fixed columns. Okay, well actually here's an example right here. So here's a container within the body of the page. Because of the fact that this container has its height set, then if there's more content, it shows up with the scroll bar automatically, because in Dreamweaver, if I set the positioning, hello, where are you? It doesn't matter, I'll just pick this one. In Dreamweaver, if I set to positioning to set overflow to auto, what would happen is that's what this person did. They have a container, they gave it a fixed height, and they set the overflow set to auto, so this scroll bar shows up automatically. Okay? Not related to CSS, why does Dreamweaver update the student server when you preview it in browser with this site, but sometimes with other sites it only goes to the local file address? Okay, Tony, so in Dreamweaver, as we looked at the beginning of class, if you are working with, for example, the digital classroom lessons, then you don't have a remote server set up. So when you preview it, it only goes to the local file address. Whereas on the other hand, for the homework assignments, because of the fact that you've set up remote server information, when you preview it and you have testing selected, it goes to the remote site. Does that answer that question for you? Okay, so while anybody finishes up with their questions, let me jump over to the homework, and you'll see that this is going to be a piece of cake for you. Homework. You watch these videos called Understanding CSS Basics. And I'm going to put a little marker right in here. So we covered extensively today conversations about CSS and how you access CSS inside of Dreamweaver. Let's talk about the homework. You read lesson 4 of the book. Make sure that you go to your local site definition and point directly to the DW04 lessons chapter of your book files, as I showed at the beginning of today's lecture. Then you click on this link and watch the 6 videos called Understanding CSS Basics. This is going to be mostly review for you at this point. Rules and styles, styling text, page layout basics, CSS styles panels and style sheets, using the property inspector to edit and create styles, and finally this last one is something a little different, something we haven't covered, adding a menu bar to a web page. After you watch all those videos, you examine my Homework 3 example web page just to see how it's laid out. Okay? Then you open up HW3 in Dreamweaver. You've already created that page. You go remove the text in the content div and replace it with steps 6, 7, and 8 below. Step 6 is summarizing in one sentence per video the understanding basic CSS videos. In other words, you're going to watch those videos and you're going to give me a one-sentence explanation about what each of those videos are about. Step 7 is placing an image, maximum 400 by 400, with the image selected. Go to the Properties panel and choose Class FLT Right to make the image float right. And you might think to yourself, well, wait a second, I didn't create a class called FLT Right. You're right, you didn't create it, but you know what? It's already in the code of the default file that you created for this class. So we see it says FLT-RIGHT. If I put an image over here, and I wanted that to float left or right, I would select it and choose Class Float Right. So this class is already part of the style sheet that was created because you used a default file that had styles already used. And finally, after you do that, you save and upload the file to your web page by selecting Preview in Browser. So like I said, the homework part is the easiest part of this week's assignment. The hardest part is making sure that the CSS Basics document, you really fully understand what's going on. And the rest of the time after you're finishing reading Lesson 4, you're going to play with CSS. Now, Christy, the only video I couldn't play was the first one. I tried reloading it several times and on different computers. Well, I'm not sure the first one, are you talking about the lectures or are you talking about something else? Because I see, Christy, earlier you said the hardest part is getting videos to play. So could you tell me specifically which video you're referring to? These 6 videos from the Adobe website, is that what you're referring to? Huh. Well, that's interesting. I don't really know what to tell you since these are coming from the Adobe website, and they're a big company, so you would think they have their act together. You know, sometimes you might want to try it not only in different computers, try it in different browsers. That might be an issue. Sometimes, yeah, it could be Flash. I don't know if these are. Yep, they do. They have Flash. Yeah, these are embedded with the Flash player, so it could be a Flash issue. Good one there, Carol. So, any other questions? Any other questions? Like I said, the homework part is going to be the easiest part, but that was a whirlwind tour, ladies and gentlemen, of CSS. That style sheet panel. The CSS rules definition dialog box is really interesting and has tons and tons of stuff inside of it. So you want to really play with this stuff. Okay? Any other questions before we wrap it up? You guys have been really patient. We've gone pretty far today. I'm very happy with the work. Okay, So I'm going to end this recording. I'll stick around for a couple of minutes in case anybody has any questions. Otherwise, please make sure to get this week's homework posted by midnight tonight and get started on next week's homework and really dive into CSS. And thanks so much for coming. I really enjoy lecturing when there are people in the room. See you all next week.